Our apartment smelled like rot. Jake's jars of hair made my skin crawl. His threats got worse every day. I snuck into his room to expose him and heard the door creak open. I was a freshman at the University of Seattle, wide-eyed and ready for the adventure of college life. My name's Emma, and I'd just moved into a cozy apartment in Capitol Hill, a vibrant neighborhood buzzing with coffee shops and street art. The university paired me with a roommate named Jake, a lanky sophomore with a mop of curly hair and a grin that seemed permanently glued to his face. At first, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Jake was quirky, sure, but in a way that felt endearing, like a character from a sitcom you can't help but root for. On move-in day, I caught him sketching detailed weather charts on our living room wall with a marker. "Gotta track the Seattle rain patterns," he said, winking, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I laughed, thinking it was a one-off. Then there was the time he pulled out a handheld megaphone to order tacos at a drive-thru, claiming it cut through the static of human error. People in the car behind us honked, but Jake just waved like he was conducting an orchestra. His energy was infectious, and I figured living with him would be an adventure. Jake had other quirks too. He'd rearrange our fridge magnets into cryptic messages like, "The spoons know your secrets." Once he spent an hour explaining how he believed every coffee mug had a soul and deserved a name. I named mine Betsy to humor him, and he beamed like I'd passed some secret test. For a while, it was fun. We'd stay up late, swapping stories about high school over cheap pizza, the kind that leaves grease stains on your jeans. I thought I'd found a friend, maybe even a good one, but then things got weird. About a month into the semester, Jake started acting off. He'd linger a bit too long when we talked, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to solve a puzzle. One evening, as I was studying in the living room, he slid a small, lumpy object across the table. It was a clay figurine he'd sculpted, a wobbly, misshapen heart with my initials carved into it. "Emma," he said, his voice low and dramatic, "you've got my heart in a chokehold." He clutched his chest, fate collapsing onto the couch. My stomach twisted. It was meant to be a joke, but it felt too intense, too personal. I forced a smile and mumbled something about focusing on school, hoping to brush it off. "No pressure," he said, but his grin faltered, and his eyes darkened for a split second. I told myself I was overthinking it. Jake was just being Jake. Goofy, over the top, harmless. But that moment stuck with me, like a crack in a windshield you know will spread. I had no idea how right my gut was. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Jake's quirks weren't just eccentric. They were a mask for something deeper, something that would unravel in ways I couldn't predict. That clay heart wasn't a cute gesture. It was the first step toward a nightmare that would turn our apartment into a battleground. After I turned down Jake's clay heart confession, something shifted. It was like flipping a switch in our Capitol Hill apartment. The Jake I knew, the guy who named coffee mugs and waved at cars like a parade marshal, started to fade. At first, it was subtle. He'd leave dishes in the sink, crusted with last week's ramen, when he used to scrub everything spotless. I'd find his socks balled up on the couch, mixed with empty chip bags and soda cans. Our living room, once a cozy spot for late-night chats, began to look like a landfill. I tried to brush it off. College life is hectic, right? Maybe Jake was just stressed, but the mess grew. One morning, I tripped over a pile of his stuff in the corner. Clothes, textbooks, and, weirdly, a half-eaten burrito wrapped in foil, rotting like it had been there for days. The smell hit me like a punch, sour and sharp. I asked Jake about it, keeping my tone light. "Hey, can we maybe tidy up a bit?" He shrugged, his eyes barely leaving his phone. "Too busy with classes, Emma. Chill." His voice had an edge, like I was the one being unreasonable. Then things got stranger. I started noticing jars on the kitchen counter, small, cloudy glass ones, like the kind you'd use for homemade jam. Except these weren't filled with fruit. One had clumps of hair, tangled and matted, like it was pulled from a brush. Another was packed with nail clippings, meticulously stacked like some grim art project. I asked Jake what the hell they were. He grinned, but it wasn't his usual goofy smile. It was tight, almost mocking. "Just collecting memories," he said, then walked away, leaving me staring at those jars, my skin crawling. I tried reasoning with him again. "Jake, this is getting out of hand. The smell, the mess. It's not okay." He laughed, a hollow sound, and said, "You're too uptight, Emma. Live a little." I wanted to scream. Our apartment was starting to feel like a cage, not a home. I'd come back from classes at the University of Seattle and dread opening the door, knowing I'd be hit with that stench or find another bizarre collection on display. Weekends were no better. Jake would breeze past the trash can, tossing food wrappers onto his growing pile like it was a game. I'd haul the garbage out myself, my hands shaking with frustration. Once I found an open can of tuna on the counter, buzzing with flies. I gagged, grabbing a trash bag to deal with it, but Jake just watched, leaning against the fridge with a smirk. "You're so good at cleaning," he said, like it was a compliment. My stomach churned. Was this because I rejected him? I asked him straight up one night, my voice shaking. "Jake, is this about me saying no?" He went silent, his eyes cold, then turned and walked to his room without a word. I started spending more time at the library, avoiding our apartment, but I couldn't escape the lease, or Jake. His quirks weren't funny anymore. They were a warning, and I was starting to feel like I was living with a stranger. The air in our Capitol Hill apartment grew heavier, like a storm was brewing inside its walls. Jake's behavior wasn't just messy anymore, it was invasive, unsettling. I started noticing how he'd linger when my friends came over, his eyes flicking over them, his voice dropping to make comments just loud enough to hear. "Nice skirt, Sarah," he'd say with a smirk, or, "You girls look like you're auditioning for something." My friends, Sarah, Mia, anyone, would laugh it off at first, but I saw their shoulders tense, their smiles fade. Soon they stopped coming over. I couldn't blame them. The vibe in the apartment had shifted from quirky to creepy. One Friday night, I came home from a study group to find our living room packed with strangers. Jake Jake hadn't said a word about throwing a party. The music was so loud it rattled the windows, and empty beer cans littered every surface. I spotted my backpack, my favorite one, stuffed with my biology notes, being tossed around like a football. Red stains, probably wine, streaked across my textbooks. I snatched it back, my heart pounding, and pushed through the crowd to my room, locking the door behind me. The chaos outside felt like it was clawing at the walls, trying to get in. The next morning, I confronted Jake. "You can't just throw parties without asking me," I said, my voice shaking. He rolled his eyes, sprawled on the couch like he owned the place. "It was just a little fun, Emma. Relax." I wanted to scream. My notes were ruined, my clothes smelled like cheap vodka, and our apartment looked like a tornado had hit it. But it wasn't just the mess. It was the way Jake's friends acted, like they were entitled to our space, to me. The worst came during spring break. Jake invited a group of his buddies to stay over, promising it'd just be for a weekend. They ended up crashing for 5 days, turning our apartment into their personal frat house. One night, as I headed to my room to escape their noise, one of Jake's friends, tall, with a grin that made my stomach twist, knocked on my door. "Your room's real nice, Emma," he said, leaning against the frame, his eyes scanning past me. "Mind if I crash here? Couch is lumpy." I froze, my hand tight on the doorknob. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "This is my space." He chuckled, stepping closer. "Just thought you'd want some company." I slammed the door, my heart racing, and shoved my dresser against it for good measure. After that, I barely slept. Every creak in the apartment made me jump. My friends texted, offering to come get me, but the idea of walking past Jake's crew in the middle of the night felt like walking into a lion's den. I was trapped, my own home a maze of unease. Jake's goofy charm was gone, replaced by something darker. I started wondering if he'd always been this way, or if my rejection had flipped some switch in him. Either way, I was done pretending this was normal. I couldn't take it anymore. Our Capitol Hill apartment had become a nightmare, and Jake's behavior was spiraling out of control. I decided to report him to the University of Seattle's housing office. I sat down with a counselor, my hands shaking as I described the rotting food, the creepy jars of hair and nails, the unauthorized parties, and that unsettling encounter with his friend. The counselor nodded, her face serious, and promised to look into it. I left feeling a flicker of hope, like maybe I could reclaim my home. But Jake found out. That evening, I was in the kitchen trying to salvage something edible from our fridge when he stormed in. His face was red, his eyes wild. "You went to the housing office?" he hissed, towering over me. My heart slammed against my ribs. "You're trying to ruin my life, Emma." His voice was low, venomous, each word like a blade. He stepped closer, pinning me against the counter. "Take it back or I'll make your life hell." I froze, my breath catching. I'd never seen him like this, unhinged, threatening. I mumbled something about stress, promising to withdraw the complaint, just to get him to back off. He smirked, like he'd won, and walked away. I called the housing office the next day, my voice barely steady, and told them I'd exaggerated due to school pressure. It was a lie, and it felt like swallowing glass, but I was scared. Withdrawing the complaint was the worst mistake I could have made. Jake's behavior got darker. He started leaving jars of animal teeth, small, yellowed, jagged things, on the kitchen counter, each labeled with dates in his messy scrawl. I found a carton of eggs he'd left out weeks ago. The shells cracked, a sickly sweet stench filling the air. Maggots writhed inside and tiny flies buzzed around them. I gagged, my stomach churning, and confronted him. "Jake, this is disgusting. It's not safe." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. "Touch them, and you'll regret it," he said, his voice flat, like a warning shot. I backed off, my pulse racing. The apartment felt like a prison now, every corner tainted by Jake's presence. I stopped using the common areas, tiptoeing to the bathroom and back like a ghost. One night, I overheard him laughing with his friends in the living room, their voices loud and mocking. "She's so uptight," Jake said, and I heard my name in their jeers. It wasn't just negligence anymore. It was personal, like he was punishing me for saying no. My hands shook as I locked my bedroom door, pushing my dresser against it again. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every laugh from the living room felt like a threat closing in. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Jake wasn't just a bad roommate. He was a ticking time bomb, and I was trapped in the blast zone. I had to do something, anything, to take back control before things got worse. I was done being a prisoner in my own home. Jake's threats, his creepy jars, the rotting eggs, it was too much. I decided to fight back, but I needed proof. Words wouldn't cut it anymore. I had to show the University of Seattle's housing office exactly what I was dealing with in our Capitol Hill apartment. So, I started gathering evidence, moving like a spy in my own life. I snapped photos of the kitchen, maggot-filled eggs, jars of teeth, piles of trash spilling across the counter. I recorded audio of Jake's late-night rants, his voice slurring through the thin walls as he mocked me to his friends. Each click of my phone's camera felt like a small act of rebellion, but my hands shook every time. I knew I needed more, something undeniable. Jake had a 3-hour lab on Wednesdays, so I picked one afternoon to slip into his room. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open, phone ready to document the chaos. His room was worse than I imagined. Dirty laundry towered in one corner, the air thick with the stench of moldy takeout containers stacked on his desk. Those jars of nail clippings and hair lined a shelf, each labeled with dates like some twisted diary. I snapped photos, my thumb muffling the camera's shutter sound, my breath shallow. A half-eaten sandwich, green with mold, lay on the floor like a science experiment gone wrong. I crouched to get a clear shot, my stomach twisting. Then I heard it. The front door creaked open. My blood ran cold. Jake wasn't supposed to be back for hours. Had his lab ended early, or did he skip it? My mind raced, scrambling for an excuse. I tucked my phone into my pocket and stood, pretending to tidy his desk, my hands shaking as I moved a pen and a crumpled notebook. His footsteps echoed closer, heavy and deliberate. I held my breath, praying he'd head to the kitchen first. Luck was on my side for once. The fridge door squeaked open, and I heard him rummaging. Seizing the moment, I slipped out, easing his door shut with the faintest click. I grabbed a book from the living room table and sank onto the couch, trying to look absorbed in it. Jake strolled in, a soda in hand, and grinned. "Spring cleaning again, Emma?" he asked, his tone teasing but sharp. I forced a laugh, my voice thin. "Just keeping busy." He didn't push, but his eyes lingered like he was searching for cracks in my act. He went to his room, and I let out a shaky breath. My phone burned in my pocket, filled with evidence that could end this nightmare. I wasn't safe yet, but I was one step closer to freedom. With my evidence in hand, I felt a spark of courage. I wasn't going to let Jake control my life anymore. The next morning, I marched to the University of Seattle's housing office, my phone heavy with photos, videos, and audio of the nightmare I'd been living in our Capitol Hill apartment. I laid it all out for the counselor: the jars of teeth, the rotting eggs crawling with maggots, the recordings of Jake's mocking rants and his friends' creepy comments. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through my photos, her face paling at the sight of the labeled nail clippings. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice firm. For the first time in months, I felt heard. The housing office moved fast. Within days, they scheduled an inspection of our apartment. I stayed at a friend's place in Fremont, my stomach in knots, waiting for news. When the call came, the counselor's voice was steady, but serious. Jake had violated multiple housing policies: health violations, harassment, unauthorized guests. The evidence was overwhelming. Campus security escorted him out that afternoon, his belongings packed into boxes like he'd never existed. I didn't see it happen, but I imagined his smirk fading as reality hit. The university moved me to a new dorm in Fremont, a quiet single room with no roommate, just the way I wanted. The air felt cleaner, the walls brighter, like I could finally breathe again. The housing office apologized, admitting they should have acted sooner. They promised to review their complaint process, but I barely cared. I was free. My new place was a haven, a space where I could study without dread, where the kitchen didn't smell like a landfill. Looking back, I see how much I learned. Living with Jake was a nightmare, but it taught me to trust my instincts. When his quirks turned dark, I ignored my gut too long, afraid to make waves. But gathering that evidence, standing up to him, it showed me I could fight for myself. I'm stronger now, more aware of the line between quirky and dangerous. I've thrown myself into my classes, made new friends, and even started exploring Fremont's quirky cafes. The nightmare is behind me, and I'm building a life that feels like mine again.